This is pretty frightening. I'm going to show you a clip, it's roughly a minute, from a video posted on Yahoo Finance with an analyst talking about how Uber is massively outperforming Lyft. This is a bigger deal than most people think.
With this analysis, what sort of changed was that we found a couple of things. One, the industry overall saw a little bit of an uptick in terms of time to pick up, which is how we gauge how well supply is doing versus demand. I think magnitude-wise, Uber wasn't so concerning, but I think Lyft's increase being more than 20 points higher than Uber was sort of the concern. And then secondarily, I think Lyft's pretty exposed to the West Coast, which for those who aren't aware has been obviously lagging in terms of coming back to work and showing more normal behaviors post-COVID. And with a fifth of the business, we think being in LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, places like those, we look at LA as a pretty hard proxy for how Lyft's doing, and there Uber massively outperformed, I would say, in terms of wait times relative to Lyft. To us, it kind of suggests that there may be something bigger, more structural in nature going on in terms of Uber being able to acquire that driver supply, and as a result, kind of forces us in the position of having to change our rating, which is obviously what we did.
I'm not gonna lie, this to me is actually, for lack of a better word, scary. I already did a video about Uber and Lyft in 2023, looking at future projections and how Lyft is slowly falling off. And I think that in a weird, unique way, when it comes to the ride-sharing community, when it comes to ride-sharing in general around the world, I feel like you really do need both Lyft and Uber to have that yin and yang balance. If there's only one, that's going to be unbelievably detrimental, I think, in general. Not only for drivers, but for riders, for everyone involved in the rideshare community. To show you these statistics again, in terms of the percentage growth between July 2022 and September of 2022, in terms of minutes, Uber took about 13.5% longer. Lyft, on the other hand, increased by 44.3%. Jumping down to the third panel, you can see in terms of the ride cost per hour that Uber increased 6.3%, but Lyft increased more, 7.8%. I talked a lot about the analytics in the revenue in that Uber 2023 and Lyft 2023 video. I have a link listed below to it in the description if you want to watch it. But what's really scary about this to me is it's showing that Lyft is slowly falling off. I mean, I'm going to be honest, just in my own personal experience, looking at anecdotal evidence, there's been so many times here in LA where I take an Uber or a Lyft. However, let's say if it's a high peak area, take like a Friday night or Saturday night, which is typically when I do take a Lyft or an Uber, I'm just kind of used to mostly looking at Uber. When I pull up Lyft, so many times I see that dreaded limited availability, and that means that it's gonna be very difficult for me to get a Lyft. And like I said, just my own personal experience, I'm more just like, all right, I'm just gonna mostly use Uber, or why check Lyft where I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna be able to get a ride, or if I do get one, it's gonna take significantly longer, and why do that when I can just get one through Uber? And this is very unfortunate. I do wanna stress, for me personally, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on a video, but I don't have an exact preference per se. There's been some times when I was driving that Lyft paid more. A lot of times I will say Uber was paying more. It really depends on the city. It depends on, so many different factors like I've talked about in other videos. But for me personally, I don't really have a preference. I know some people are like, I love Lyft, I hate Uber, or vice versa. And of course, if you're driving for Uber and Lyft, you may have a very different perspective than a rider who takes and orders Ubers or Lyfts. And what's difficult about this is, remember that the only way Uber and Lyft can make money, in a sense, is if people are ordering those rides. And if it's taking significantly longer to get a Lyft, that over time is going to really add up. And like I said, for me now, in my own personal experience, I'm more used to just using Uber because I know I can quickly get a ride with that and not have to wait a significant amount of time compared to Lyft. I will say, at least I feel like here in LA, in my own experience, I do feel like Lyft is traditionally going to be cheaper than Uber. Not always, but typically it is. So I will say that. However, as this analyst has pointed out, the ride cost per hour for Lyft has gone up overall, which means in a lot of areas, you're going to be spending more money to take a Lyft. And just based off the strict mathematics and statistics, you're also going to be waiting longer. In comparison, you could take an Uber, which statistically speaking is going to be cheaper, and you're going to get it quicker. Which one would you rather do if you're ordering it as rider? That is the big issue. And like I've said in numerous videos, this is very worrisome for me because let's say there's only one ride-sharing service. There was only Lyft or only Uber, it would have an entire monopoly over the entire ride-sharing industry. And in addition, I've mentioned this before in other videos as well, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to start a new ride-sharing company. I mean, I'll just say this, it's not impossible, but brutally, brutally tough because you need those transactions to happen at the same time. Like I've mentioned, you need someone to be on the road willing to drive for your company at the same exact time someone is willing to order that exact ride. It's not like a sports drink, it's not like a candy bar, it's not like a physical product like a microphone, for example, where you put it on the shelf and if someone buys it a week, 2 weeks, 6 months from then, no big deal. Obviously, if it's food, you want to make sure it's not expired, but it can be on the shelf for a while. The shelf life is pretty long in terms of that transaction to take place. When it comes to ride sharing, that transaction has to happen at the exact same time simultaneously for both the rider and the driver. And that's what worries me about Uber and Lyft. Of course, Uber versus Lyft has always been the biggest debate, and everyone has their own opinion about it, but I feel like that you do need, like I said in the beginning of this video, you do need both. I think it's the perfect yin and yang when it comes to ride sharing, and I'm just worried about any type of monopolization that could happen over the ride sharing industry. You're talking, if that did happen, obviously we're going now down towards Murphy's Law path, so to speak, or worst case scenario, but you're talking about drivers maybe not getting as much money as they used to. You know, for a lot of drivers, like say it's a Friday night and I pull up Uber and there's not that many bonuses, not that many surges, hey, I just pull up Lyft. I have two different options to optimize my revenue as a driver. And on the other side, what a lot of riders do is they pull up Uber, they pull up Lyft, they see which one is cheaper, they see which one is closer, how quickly can I get a ride, they order it, boom, they're good to go. However, if there's just one, let's say Uber takes over in 2023 and Lyft is gone, now you're talking about the fact that Uber could charge an insane amount and you don't really have any other alternatives. Of course, taxis are always an option and taxis have been getting more popular as Lyft and Uber prices have been going up a lot. I'm really hoping Lyft can pull through and improve their wait times, improve maybe their cost, and come back to heavily competing with Uber. I feel like throughout the years, Uber's always been the main one, especially if you look at international travel. I was in Costa Rica earlier this year, no Lyft, but they had Uber. That's pretty much the case for a lot of international countries, and it is getting to the point where a lot of countries are now rolling out with Lyft, but for the most part, especially when you look at the international statistics, it's only Uber. And as Uber continues to take over, and they keep adding these new features like I've talked about so many times, whether it's Uber Connect, Uber Parking, renting a car through Uber, the fact they're doing Uber Explore now, concert tickets, and book restaurants and everything. The fact they're rolling out Uber Charter, we can rent party buses. Uber's really starting to put their hands in so many different niches and so many different industries. And it worries me, especially given these statistics. And remember, numbers don't lie. Given these statistics, I'm worried what will happen with Lyft, especially next year.